I didn't think the night would hinge on a sentence like that. I'd come because my friend texted me. Can you stop by? The printer's dead. Again. Same building he'd lived in since college. Same narrow stairwell that always smelled faintly like burnt coffee and dust. I remember checking my phone as I climbed. Already half annoyed. Already rehearsing the joke I'd make about him never learning to fix anything himself. I knocked once. Then twice. The door opened before I could knock a third time. She stood there barefoot, one hand still on the doorframe like she'd been leaning against it, wearing a soft gray sweater that looked borrowed from a quieter life. Her hair was pulled back loosely, not styled, just decided against. There was a split second where neither of us spoke, like the air had forgotten what it was supposed to do. Then she smiled. Not big, not polite. I was hoping it was you. She said it easily. Too easily. As if she hadn't just tilted something inside my chest. Oh, I said. Brilliant. Hey. Is he? He's in the back, she said, stepping aside. Still arguing with the machine. I'd met her once before. Briefly. At a family barbecue months ago where she'd been introduced as my sister and then pulled into 3 different conversations before I could ask her anything that mattered. Back then she'd been all sharp humor and confident posture. Tonight, there was something quieter about her. Or maybe I was just paying closer attention. The apartment was warmer than the hallway. Lamps instead of overhead lights. A half-folded blanket on the couch. The kind of place that felt lived in, not curated. She moved ahead of me, and I caught myself noticing how she slowed slightly, like she was aware of the space between us and didn't want to stretch it too far. Coffee? She asked, already heading toward the kitchen. Sure, I said, though I hadn't planned on staying long. She poured it without asking how I took it, then paused, glanced at me, and added milk. Not much. It shouldn't have meant anything. Somehow it did. While we waited for the machine in the back to finish making its dying noises, we stood at opposite ends of the counter. Not facing each other, just close enough to feel the other's presence. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the tick of a wall clock that was slightly too loud. She wrapped both hands around her mug and stared into it like it might offer instructions. So, she said finally, you always come when he calls. I guess, I said. He's persistent. She laughed softly, then stopped. Her smile faded into something more thoughtful, and for a moment, she didn't look at me at all. That's good of you. The way she said good made it sound like a question she didn't want answered. When my friend yelled from the other room that the printer was officially possessed, she rolled her eyes, but didn't move. Neither did I. We stood there, suspended in that small space, like there was something else happening we hadn't named yet. As I passed her to head down the hall, our fingers brushed. Not accidentally, at least, not entirely. She didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. It lasted maybe a second, maybe less. Later, after the printer was fixed and I was halfway down the stairs, I realized I couldn't remember anything she and I had actually said. Only the way she'd looked at me when she opened the door. And the strange, quiet certainty that I'd been invited into something I wasn't sure I knew how to leave. I told myself I was only stopping by because she'd asked. Her message had been short. If you're around, could you help me move a few boxes? No emojis. No explanation. I stared at it longer than I needed to, then replied sure before I could talk myself out of it. This time, she didn't smile when she opened the door. She looked tired. Not dramatically, just in the way people do when they've been holding things together for too long. Her hair was down now, brushing her shoulders, and there were faint lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there the first night. Or maybe I hadn't noticed. She stepped back to let me in, already turning away, already somewhere else. Thanks for coming, she said. Her voice was polite. Careful. The boxes were stacked in the spare room. Old books, paperwork, things that smelled faintly of dust and time. We worked side by side without much talking. She moved efficiently, like she didn't want to give the moment a chance to stretch into something else. I followed her lead, lifting when she pointed, setting things down where she said. Still, I noticed things. The way she flexed her fingers before gripping the heavier boxes, as if bracing herself. How she laughed once, quick, almost surprised, when I nearly dropped a stack of folders. How that laugh faded faster than it should have, like she'd remembered something mid-sound. You don't have to take the heavy ones, I said. I'm fine, she replied immediately. Too immediately. We worked for a while longer before she finally sat down on the edge of the bed, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath since I arrived. She rubbed her hands together, slow, absent-minded. Sorry, she said. I didn't realize how much stuff there was. It's okay. She nodded, staring at the floor. The room felt smaller then, quieter. I leaned against the doorframe, unsure if stepping closer would be an intrusion or an invitation. I used to be better at asking for help, she said, still not looking at me. Somewhere along the way, I just stopped. There it was. Not a confession. Not really. Just a crack. I waited. Didn't rush to fill the space. She finally looked up at me, and for a second her expression softened, like she'd forgotten who she was supposed to be around me. Then it closed again. You're very attentive, she added, almost distracted. Most people aren't. I shrugged. I noticed things. Her mouth twitched, like she almost smiled. Almost. When we finished, she walked me to the door. This time, neither of us moved right away. She rested her hand on the handle, fingers curled, knuckles pale. Thank you, she said quietly. For the boxes? She glanced at me then, really looked at me. For coming, she said. I nodded, stepped closer without meaning to, close enough to feel the warmth from her shoulder. She didn't step back. For a moment, it felt like the air between us was waiting to see who would breathe first. It started raining before either of us noticed. We were sitting at the small kitchen table, plates pushed aside, the clock blinking 12 o'clock because she'd never reset it after the last power outage. The meal had been simple, store-bought soup, bread torn instead of sliced. Nothing intentional. Just two people who hadn't planned on eating together and then did. The rain grew louder, tapping against the windows in uneven bursts. She got up to close one she'd left cracked, and when she leaned forward, I saw the faint tremor in her hand. She pressed her palm flat against the glass for a second longer than necessary, like she was grounding herself. You can stay until it eases, she said, without turning around. I nodded, even though I'd already decided that. We talked about small things. Her work, a client who never returned calls, my friend's habit of borrowing things and forgetting to give them back. The kind of conversation people have when they're circling something they don't want to name. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She froze. Didn't reach for it. Didn't look at the screen. Just stood there, shoulders stiff, like she already knew who it was. Sorry, she said finally. She checked it then. The light from the screen caught her face, and something shifted. Not anger. Not relief. Something heavier. She turned it face down without answering. You don't have to explain, I said. She exhaled, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. I wasn't going to. She came back to the table and sat across from me, closer than before. Our knees almost touched. I could smell the soap she used. Clean, faintly floral. Ordinary. Intimate. I'm not good at this, she said. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug, letting things get complicated. What's this? I asked, before I could stop myself. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her gaze lingered, searching, like she was weighing the cost of honesty. You, she said. Being here. Feeling noticed. The word landed softly. Stayed. I wanted to say something that would make it easier for her. Or harder. I wasn't sure which. Instead, I stayed quiet. Let her finish if she wanted to. She didn't. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and distant, like a warning we were both pretending not to hear. She reached for her mug, then stopped. Her hand hovered there, suspended between us. I noticed how close it was to mine, how easy it would be to close the gap. I should check on my brother, she said suddenly, standing too fast. He's probably wondering where we went. The moment snapped. Just like that. She busied herself in the other room while I stared at my hands, flexing my fingers, willing them to stay where they were. When she came back, she kept her distance. Polite again, careful again. When the rain finally slowed and I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Her hand brushed my arm as she reached past me for the light. I'm glad you stayed, she said. I hesitated, leaned in just enough to feel her breath hitch. So close that if I'd moved even an inch more, everything would have changed. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a knock or a call or some dramatic reason. Just an afternoon that stretched longer than it should have, and the quiet that settled between us when there was nothing left to pretend about. She was sitting on the couch this time, shoes still on, coat folded beside her like she might leave at any moment. I stood near the window, watching the light fade from gold to gray. The room felt paused. Not tense, decided. "You've been avoiding me," I said. The words surprised me as much as they did her. She didn't deny it. Just nodded, once slow. Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "I didn't know how to stop," she said. "Without hurting you." "I'm not fragile," I replied. Too quickly. She finally looked up at me then. Not gently, not kindly. "Honestly, I know," she said. "That's what makes this worse." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things we hadn't agreed to feel. She leaned back against the couch, eyes on the ceiling, like she couldn't hold my gaze and her thoughts at the same time. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. "You know that, right?" I nodded. My throat felt tight. "I know. I don't want to be someone who—" She stopped. Started again. "I don't want to be someone who takes comfort where she shouldn't." I took a step closer before I could stop myself. Not toward her, just closer to the truth. "I didn't come here looking for anything," I said. "But I don't think I'm imagining this." Her laugh came out sharp, not amused. "That's the problem. You're not." She stood then, slowly, like if she moved too fast, she'd break something. We were close enough now that I could see the faint scar near her collarbone, the one she always tried to hide. I wondered who had put it there, or why. "You make me feel seen," she said. The words were almost whispered, and I hate how much I've missed that. I swallowed. Didn't reach for her. Didn't let myself. "I don't want to ruin anything," I said. She shook her head, eyes shining. "You already are." Not accusing, just aware. We stood there, suspended in that moment where the truth had been said, but nothing had been decided. Her breath was shallow. Mine too. The room hummed with the quiet of it all. "I don't know what I'm asking for," she said finally. "I just know I can't pretend this is nothing anymore." She stepped back then, put space between us. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. At the door, she paused. Her hand hovered over the handle. "If you stay," she said, not looking at me, "something will break." Then she opened the door, and didn't tell me whether she wanted me to leave. I almost didn't listen to the voicemail. It had come in the night before, unknown number, and I'd assumed it was spam. I only played it because I couldn't sleep and my phone was already in my hand. The room too quiet, my thoughts too loud. Her voice filled the space like it didn't belong there. "Hey," she said. Just that. A pause. A breath I recognized. "I don't know why I'm calling. There's something you should know." I sat up. "I didn't tell you everything," she continued. "About why I'm like this. Careful. Why I pull away." Another pause. Longer this time. "I was married. For a long time. To someone who needed me more than he loved me." She let out a small, humorless laugh. I thought that was enough. Being needed. My chest tightened. "He died," she said simply. No embellishment. No tears in her voice. Just the fact of it. Not suddenly. Slowly. And when it was over, everyone kept asking how I was holding up. Like strength was the only thing they could imagine me being. I pressed my thumb into my palm, grounding myself. "I learned how to disappear inside responsibility," she said. "How to be useful instead of wanted." Her voice wavered then, just slightly. "And then you showed up." The words landed harder than anything she'd said to my face. "You don't remind me of him," she added quickly. "Not really. But you remind me of who I was before I learned how to go quiet." Silence. Then, softer. "That scares me." The message ended without goodbye. The next time I saw her, she didn't mention it right away. We sat across from each other at the same kitchen table, daylight this time, dust motes floating between us. She looked steadier. "Guard up again." "I listened," I said. She nodded once. Didn't ask what I thought. Didn't apologize. "I wasn't sure you would." I almost didn't. Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That would have been easier." We sat there, hands wrapped around mugs gone cold. I wanted to reach across the table, say something that would undo years of her learning how not to need. Instead, I said, "Thank you for telling me." She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. Not relief. Not fear. Recognition. I didn't mean to put that on you, she said. You didn't, I replied. You trusted me. Her fingers tightened around the mug, then loosened. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. With you knowing. I stood, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she needed to. When I stopped beside her chair, I didn't touch her. Just rested my hand on the table. Close enough to matter. We don't have to do anything, I said. Not yet. She closed her eyes. Just for a second. And when she opened them, the distance between us felt different. Thinner, more fragile, as if something old had finally been named, and neither of us could pretend we hadn't heard it. Nothing collapsed the way I'd expected it to. There was no moment where everything finally spilled over, no line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Just an evening that arrived heavy with things already understood. She didn't invite me over this time. She just didn't tell me not to come. The door was unlocked. A light on in the living room. She was sitting on the floor, back against the couch, a stack of old photos spread out in front of her like she'd opened a drawer and forgotten to close it. When she looked up and saw me, she didn't smile. She didn't apologize. You can sit, she said. So I did. Carefully. A little distance between us at first, like habit. The room smelled faintly of dust and something warm. Tea, maybe. Outside, traffic moved in slow waves. Life continuing, indifferent. These were supposed to go in a box, she said, gesturing to the photos. But I kept stopping. I picked one up only after she nodded. Her younger self stared back at me, eyes brighter, posture looser. Someone who hadn't yet learned how to hold herself together so tightly. I forgot what it felt like, she said quietly. To be looked at without being needed. I set the photo down. I'm sorry if she shook her head. Don't. She turned toward me then, knees drawn up, arms resting loosely around them. There was no performance left in her. No caution, just honesty that had grown tired of hiding. I don't want to pretend anymore, she said. But I also don't want to rush into something just because it feels like oxygen. I don't want that either, I replied, and meant it. We sat there for a long time, close enough now that our shoulders touched. The contact was almost incidental. Almost. I felt the warmth of her through the thin fabric of her sweater, the way her breathing slowly matched mine, without either of us noticing. At some point, her hand shifted, rested on the floor between us, palm open, waiting without asking. I didn't grab it, didn't lace my fingers through hers. I just let my hand settle there too, close enough that our pinkies brushed. She exhaled, a sound of relief more than anything else. This feels different, she said. It is, I answered, because we're choosing it, not falling into it. She leaned her head back against the couch, eyes closed. After a moment, she tilted forward and rested her forehead against my shoulder. The weight of it startled me, not heavy, just trusting. We stayed like that. No words, no urgency, just two people sitting on the floor of a quiet room, finally letting the moment be what it was. When she lifted her head, she didn't move away. Stay, she said, not as a plea, as a decision. I didn't promise anything, didn't need to. I stayed. And for the first time since the door opened and she smiled at me like she already knew, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt settled. I'm telling this from some distance now. Not years, just enough time for the noise to settle and the important parts to stay. People like to ask when it became something, as if there was a clear moment you could point to and say, there. That's when it changed. But that's not how it worked with us. It didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself. It grew the way understanding does, quietly, unevenly, with pauses. We didn't rush. That surprised me the most. After that night on the floor, we didn't suddenly become fearless. We became careful in a different way, more honest, less performative. We learned each other's rhythms, the days she needed space, the moments I talked too much because silence made me nervous. She stopped apologizing for her tiredness. I stopped mistaking patience for passivity. What changed in her was subtle but unmistakable. She started asking for things without justifying them. Rest, time, presence. She laughed more, not the quick, deflecting kind, but the kind that stayed a second longer than necessary. Sometimes she would catch me looking at her, and instead of tightening, she'd hold my gaze. Let it land. What changed in me was harder to name. I learned that wanting doesn't have to mean taking. That staying doesn't always look like fixing. I learned how much strength there is in restraint, in letting a moment breathe instead of trying to own it. I stopped confusing intensity with depth. Love, if that's what this is, didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like sitting together after a long day, knees touching, not needing to fill the quiet. It felt like choosing each other without erasing ourselves. Like understanding that timing doesn't make something wrong, just complicated. We're still complicated. There are days the age difference feels invisible, and days it feels like a question neither of us answers out loud. There are moments she retreats, moments I hesitate. But there's also a steadiness now, a shared language built from all the things we didn't rush past. Sometimes I think back to that first night. The door opening, her smile, the way she said she'd been hoping it was me. I didn't know then what she was really hoping for. I don't think she did either. But I know this. Whatever found us wasn't about filling a gap. It was about recognizing each other in a moment we were finally ready to be seen. And that stayed with me. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?